Hey guys, welcome back. So today we are going to be digging up our elephant ears and storing them for winter time. So it's that time of year where we pull out some of our tender bulbs and store them. So technically elephant ears are not bulbs, they're actually corms, but a lot of people refer to them as bulbs or tubers, which they're not tubers either. They technically produce tubers, but they're not tubers themselves. So anyways, I don't want to confuse you guys anymore, so we're just gonna refer to them as bulbs if that makes it easier for everybody. So there are three ways in which you can winterize your elephant ears. So one way is to leave them in the ground. So if you live in zones 7 through 11, you can technically leave them in the ground, although you will want to kind of insulate them. So you can do that by putting a nice layer of mulch, or you can do like leaves or hay, just something extra to kind of protect them from the elements. So the ones that I've left in there for 2 years. I actually garden in zone 8B here in Oregon. So they're perfectly fine to leave in the ground in my area, but I do want to plant something different over there. That's why I'm gonna be digging them up today. The second way in which you can winterize your elephant ears is by treating them as houseplants. So you can dig them up, plant them in potting soil in a nice container and leave them inside. So the only thing with that is you wanna make sure that you have an area that gets a lot of sun, or you can put them under grow lights. So a lot of people do that. I've actually propagated some of them and just kind of treated them as houseplants, and that works really well as well. And the third way in which we're going to be doing today is just digging up the bulbs, corms, and cleaning them off, and then we're just going to put them in a box. So I'll show you guys what I like to do for that process. But anyways, it's pretty simple, it's easy. There's really not a lot to it, and yeah, let me show you guys what we're going to be using today, and then we will get started. So here we go. So all you're going to need to dig up your elephant ears is a box. You want to get some shovels. I'm going to be using my pruners and then some gloves, because elephant ears do contain calcium oxalate, which if you have sensitive skin, it can be an irritant. So just keep that in mind. I always like to use gloves when I do this. But you know, if you've dealt with them before without using gloves, that's perfectly fine. But I know some people have super sensitive skin, so just using gloves is always a good idea. So anyways, let's go to them and we will get them all dug up. Okay, so here they are, and they're looking pretty sad. We did have a couple of cold nights, and ideally I do this a little bit earlier, but I was busy doing other garden chores, so I didn't get to it. But these are the black stem elephant ears, and again, they've been here for a couple of years and they've done really well. And I have them planted in this really shallow bowl container. I don't know, it actually used to be a water feature, and I painted it and I use it as a container now. So you can't move this thing. It's so heavy. So this is kind of like a permanent location for this container. But I do want to come in and pull these out because I do want to plant some other things over here. And actually this whole area, there's some Colocasia over here. This one over here would be a good contender for a house plant. So maybe I'll dig him up and we'll pot him up in a nice container. And then all these other guys, I think I'm just going to store for the winter time. So when you're digging your elephant ears, you want to make sure that you're doing it from a pretty good distance from the main stem, because you don't want to go down with your shovel like right here and pierce the corms or bulbs. You don't want to pierce them or damage them. So it's always nice to do it like, I don't know, I would say at least 6 to 10 inches away. That way you have plenty of room for your shovel to go in and get underneath them. Because this is a pretty shallow container, I'm just going to use my little handheld shovel. But I know most people have them in the actual landscape, so you can use your big shovel. Just again, be very careful when you're digging close to them. And I will be digging them up with the leaves and all, and then we will cut them off and I'll show you what the next step for cleaning them and prepping them for storage is like. So let me put my camera down and we will get these all dug up. Okay, so if you're going to be storing them as houseplants, you just want to make sure you have some nice potting soil. I'm just going to use a little one, so I'm going to be using this little container, and I'll just put it in my plant room over winter time. So of course, if you are going to be using the bigger elephant ears, then of course you want to have a bigger pot to do this in. So we have our potting soil, and then we have our elephant ear, and I'm just going to pop that right in there and cover it up. And then I'll just make sure to keep it watered over winter time. It's gonna have some nice humidity in our plant room, so it'll do just fine. Or you could also just give this to someone as a present. You know, I think that's always fun to do. So this is always fun to do because you already have an established plant. So all you have to do is transplant this plant into your garden during springtime or after you pass your last frost date. The cool thing about that is that you already have your leaves. It's already an established plant versus starting from scratch where there's no leaves and you kind of have to wait for them to come in. And it's also nice to have, you know, extra house plants during the winter time when there's really not much going on in the garden. At least you have these beautiful, big, huge plants inside, and you know, you have them for springtime. So anyways, that's one reason why I love doing it this way. Okay, so now let's talk about storing them as a bulb. So you could leave the leaves on and just kind of let them die off on their own before you do this part. Today, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut them off. You can leave the leaves on again and like just let them dry out on their own. And the nice thing about doing that is that it puts more energy back into the bulb itself. So you can just leave the leaves on there, but if you don't have the time or you know you're gonna forget, just do it now. So let's see. And these I'm actually gonna just split gently. Just like this. Perfect. Perfect. So you can see this is a good example of one right here. So all I'm going to do now is just clean off all of the soil. You don't have to wash them and you don't want to scrub them because they are still pretty tender. Perfect. Just like that. And then I'm actually going to cut some of the roots as well. And you can leave the roots on while you let them dry. Okay, so now that we've cut the roots off and it's all nice and clean, we are going to let these sit for about a week before we put them in their box. So what that does, it's going to ensure that everything is nice and dry. There's no moist areas. And you just want to store, or you just want to keep them in an area that's nice and warm while they're drying. So for us, it's going to be in our plant room. You don't want to leave them outside because it is getting cooler out and these cannot withstand the cold temperature. So we're going to put them inside for about a week and then we're going to put them in our box. Okay, so once they've been sitting out for about a week, I will just put them in the box just like this. I will put this box in an area that stays between 40 and 60 degrees. You don't want to put them in an area that's going to get below freezing just because they are very tender and they won't make it. Now, I do know some people like to wrap them in newspaper, which you can totally do that. Some people like to put them in vermiculite. I don't think that's necessary. This is the way I've done it and they've come back for me year after year without a problem. The only thing is I do check on mine very often. I think like I said, every 3 weeks to a month, I check on them to make sure they're not rotting or they're not drying out too much. So just keep your eye on that. I know some people will spray like a fungicide on them before storing them. You can do that. But again, I skip that step because I do check on mine very often that I don't think it's very necessary. So I'll just keep them in an area that's nice and cool and dark and check on them every so often and you should be just fine. All right, well, wasn't that pretty easy? So remember, if you're in zones 1 through 6, then you want to make sure to dig them up just because it's going to be too cold for them. If you're in zones 7 through 11, then you can leave them in the ground. Just make sure you do a nice layer of mulch or grass cutting or leaf cutting or even hay like I've done in the past. if you're going to treat them as a houseplant, you want to make sure that they have plenty of light, and you want to make sure they stay nice and moist, because I have noticed in the past that these tend to like a lot more water than some of my other houseplants. So I always make sure to check on them more often than I do with the other plants. And if you are going to store them as bulbs, you want to make sure that they're in an area that doesn't get below freezing, just because again, they're super tender. And you want to make sure that you open that box up and just check on them. Make sure that there's no rot or any bugs, because if you do, then you want to make sure you treat it with like an insecticidal soap or remove any of the rotten ones so none of the other ones get affected. But yeah, it's pretty easy. It's nice to like do these types of projects because you invest into buying these during the springtime and planting them. So to be able to store them and use them again next year, it's always nice. And plus a lot of them do multiply, so you always get more, and it's nice again to dig them up. And if you are going to store them as houseplants, then I love to give those away just because we have so many houseplants, so it's always nice to just give them away to friends and neighbors. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. If you guys have any questions, just please ask down in the comment section. And yeah, I hope you guys learned something today, and thank you again for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
What are you doing?
I just want to dissect it and see what it looks like. It's the scientist in me wants to see what it looks like. That is so cool.
Don't feed it to me, please.
I won't feed it to you. Wow, look at all of those little holes. Oh, darn it. Wow, that is so cool.